Good morning, everyone. My name is Senior Chaplain Barry Minardi. Michael Bartell and I are co-chairs of the Mayor's Faith Initiative Human Trafficking and co-facilitators of this momentous summit. Welcome to our third virtual summit sponsored by the Las Vegas Mayor's Faith Initiative. We'd like to thank the City of Las Vegas and the Mayor's Faith Initiative for sponsoring these important discussions. We're also grateful to our guest speakers and panelists for their participation in our summit and ongoing dedication to solidify family relationships and saving our children. We are honored to present part one of the two-part summit titled Footprints to and from Foster Care. Our goal today is to raise awareness about the needs of children and families in the child welfare system and to encourage community members to become actively engaged in being part of the solution to raising healthy children and making our community stronger. The second part of our foster care summit will be scheduled for the latter part of June. You'll hear from the Child Welfare Agency and other professionals on what's being done to tackle these ongoing issues in our community affecting our most vulnerable population and what we can do to be part of the solution. The Family First Protection Services Act states nearly 500,000 children are currently in the foster care system. After years of decline in numbers of children in foster care, the number has risen steadily since 2012, with some evidence and expert opinions linking this increase to parallel rise in opioid addictions and overdose. There are approximately 3,000 children in Clark County who are in foster care ranging from 1 year old to 18 years old. There are many factors that lead to the removal of a child from their place of origin due to abuse and neglect. Statistics for Clark County are obviously on public record. Human trafficking destroys the lives of children and their families. Our experience has demonstrated that the underlying causes to this travesty are family connection, homelessness, addictions, mental health, and education. Unfortunately, these underlying causes also create a path to and from the foster care of our children. I must emphasize that the speakers and panel members of both part one and part two of the Foster Care Summit will discuss the challenges we face, possible solutions, and actions that we can take to meet the needs of our children. We encourage everyone to remove any preconceived opinions or conclusions and remain open-minded so you may properly absorb the information provided for you. Gathering factual information is a prerequisite to preparing a plan of collective and individual action to preserve our families and for our future generations. It is now my pleasure to introduce Michael Bartell, co-chair of the Mayor's Faith Initiative Human Trafficking and co-facilitator to our conference. Mike, it's all yours.
Mike, we can't hear you.
He's on mute. There he goes.
Can you hear me?
You hear
Can you hear me now? Yay, you got me. All right. It's been a morning of technology issues for my side of the family, but hey, I'm excited to see everybody on here, and I've been looking forward to this date for a while. This two-part series dealing with foster care, and I was just looking. It's been 10 years since the Mayor's Faith Initiative, under the leadership of Mayor Carolyn Goodman, has launched, and it's really been amazing to see. And I've been a part of Las Vegas personally myself since 2010. And I was really impressed when all this launched. I think there's over 120 faith leaders representing more than 70,000 people in places of worship that this was launched under the Mayor's Faith Initiative. And under that, our community was addressing different areas of great need, including addictions, education, homelessness, human trafficking, and strengthening the family. I've developed lifelong friendships with many of the people who are chairing those subcommittees. Barry and I chair the subcommittee dealing with human trafficking. But I just want to say, in introducing the Mayor Goodman, that I've had the opportunity. Free is an organization that I run, Free International. We work all over this country. We worked in cities from coast to coast, doing a lot of work in these areas of vulnerability and human trafficking. And I'm being honest and not blowing smoke by saying I have yet to find another mayor so willing to engage with these issues and embracing the faith community and the desire to see the faith community in action to reach these complicated and difficult issues here in Las Vegas. And so, man, I couldn't speak more highly of somebody than you, Mayor. And because I've seen you be willing to facilitate great work among those who want to get involved. And I want to thank you for the vision for this initiative, and want to give you an opportunity to address everyone as we look at these issues of foster care.
Thank you, Mike. Can you hear me? Yes, okay, because I don't know this technology. I'm too old and old school, but Mike, thank you. We all are so definitely committed to making everything work to help these children and keep families together that are going into foster care. But it is the Faith Initiative. And so I want to say good morning to everyone and welcome to you. I am the mayor, lucky mayor of Las Vegas, Carolyn Goodman, and thank you for spending the morning with us at this Mayor's Faith Initiative as we host the first summit of 2022, which you heard from our dear chaplain, Barry Minardi, who we thank so very much. And one of the privileges that I have as mayor is to serve with you to tackle some of our community's most pressing issues. And it is through the Mayor's Faith Initiative, as Mike has just said, because you touch the people. You actually have the contact all the time with the grassroots and the people to get the word out. Human Trafficking Working Group that the initiative has fostered is an incredible representation of a genuinely committed group of individuals with the common goal of pulling together to fight for change. All of you work so hard and tirelessly to stay informed and use best practices and shine the needed light on human trafficking and what it does to our most vulnerable among us. We know that our youth are all in need of nurturing and protection, and we as a community of caring individuals must do everything in our power to ensure that no child is prey to human trafficking. For all of you who work in child welfare to help our young people steer far away from such terrible circumstances, we salute you and we stand with you. I'm confident this morning will be a wonderful time of learning and connection and communication, because so much falls apart when we're not communicating. And today I hope you will each identify one way, just one way, to support the system and find even more ways to help our children. When you do that, I know that you'll forge ahead and lead this community to end the scourge of human trafficking. Our foster care system deserves the support of this fabulous community, and that's where you have my commitment and that of the city to be with you to end any problems that this has created. So I want to thank you again, and to our speakers, and to Chaplain Minardi and Mike Bartel as chairs of this group and this learning experience. And then my dear friend for years and years, our family court judge, Frank Sullivan, who has been just a lightning rod for all of us to learn and really understand the issues and how important the court system is to everything that we undertake, so we can have these children in families stay together. And he has been working tirelessly. We all just know our future depends on the next generation, and there can be no more issues of human trafficking. So have a wonderful time. I'm looking forward to June. My goodness, here April is coming this week. And so this is one of two, and hope there'll be 3 and 4, Mike and Chaplain, 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, till we have total control. So thank you very much. I can't believe it's been 10 years. My goodness. So have a great, great session. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mayor. Appreciate your vision. 10 years, 10 more to go as we see faith in action in the city. I'm excited to be part of it. You know, as part of all of what makes work successful in any city, you got to have the faith community involvement, the business community involvement, the city involved, and obviously our law enforcement very active in these issues of vulnerability and exploitation. And, you know, I'm honored that our Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department has been very active with these issues from the beginning. And I've developed some great friendships there too over the years. And today we have a Lieutenant, David Valenta from Metro. He has served our city in the trenches for 26 years among some of the most vulnerable and egregious things happening in our city. We're honored to have him today to address us as we get into this issue.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm realizing I might have picked too bright of a backdrop here, so hopefully you all can see me. I'm Lieutenant David Valenta with the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, specifically Special Victims Section. The vision of the LVMPD is to be the safest community in America. We will never achieve that if we do not do a better job supporting and enabling our children in the foster care and child welfare systems. Law enforcement learned a long time ago we cannot arrest our way to a safer community. It is not about the crime stats today. This is an opportunity to change the future picture by providing a better path for our most vulnerable children. For the past 3 years, I've supervised investigations of child death, child abuse, missing persons, and domestic violence. I have seen these systems and these vulnerable children firsthand. None of us can do this alone. This is not somebody else's problem. These issues belong to all of us. And only by working together will we make change. It is easy to sit on the sidelines and critique. I've been guilty of it myself. It is harder to become engaged in the process and act as a catalyst for change. Our foster care and child welfare systems deserve our support. May the summit act as a reminder for every attendee that you can positively affect the youth of this community with your time, your wisdom, and your support. I want everybody to know that Metro is committed to working with every member, every resource, every partnership we can gain out in the community. And with that, I just want to wish everybody a successful day learning about this very important topic, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Lieutenant, and thank you so much for your service to the city. You stay safe out there. I've been pouring through the bios of our speakers today, and man, we could do 20, 30 minutes just reading everyone's significant contribution in the field that we're addressing today. That's why we wanted them to be a part of this, and you know, for their effectiveness, for the voice that they have and for the heart they have for the issue that's on the table, which is foster care and the vulnerability that comes with that. I've been looking forward to our first presenter, who was just referred to by our mayor, been serving our city for many years as a judge for the 8th Judicial District Court Family Division, wherein he presides over the juvenile dependency proceedings involving abused and neglected children. Judge Sullivan also presides over the Family Treatment Court, which assists parents in overcoming their addiction issues in order to have the children safely returned into their custody. He also serves as the lead judge for the Model Court program under the auspices of the National Council of Juvenile and Family Court Justices. Man, he's been doing this for the past 22 years as a family court judge, a domestic violence commissioner, and a juvenile hearing master. And prior to that, he served as a Nevada Deputy Attorney General representing the Department of Family Services in child abuse and neglect proceedings. The list of awards he's been given is long, but probably not even long enough for everything he's been engaged in. And I am just honored, and on behalf of Chaplain Berry and the mayor, to have him present to us today on how more we can see faith in action, giving the issues that are in front of us today. Judge Sullivan, thank you so much for your rich contribution to the children of our city and state, and looking forward to getting some wisdom from you today.
Well, thank you, Mike. I really appreciate the introduction. And some of the stuff you said is true on that, but I'll leave it to you to figure out which parts of that bio is true and stuff. But no, seriousness, I want to thank everybody for joining today. I think you heard great statements from the mayor and everybody involved on that. I'm looking forward to working with our panel with Bishop Blake and Dr. Vela and Chaplain Frank and everyone on that to really get to address the issues of our children. The saying is that it takes a village to raise a child, and that's absolutely true. And we are the village, so we're really hoping to get everyone together to focus. And to me, what I really want to focus on at the end, I'm going to just talk about maybe 15, 20 minutes or so, and then I really want a call to action. I mean, we do a lot of conferences, and they're great to have conferences, but the issue is really what happens after the conference and after the Mayor's Initiative, and been very active in the past. It's a call to action. Hopefully, the goal in this is to really get our community members to become actively engaged, right? Get engaged, roll up your sleeves, get engaged and being part of the solution to raising healthy children and making our community stronger. And by getting involved with the child welfare system as an individual or as your community faith, which I'll leave with Bishop Blake will address on that, with our faith base on that, what the churches and the clergy can do on that. But the really key, successful today, would be a call to action. Let's get engaged. And as you heard, these are our most vulnerable youth. And that's really, can we get engaged? And I think in order to get engaged, I think you need to have an awareness of the system. So I'm going to spend a few minutes kind of give you a general overview of the child welfare system, and then talking about some of the obstacles in the child welfare system and the future of the child welfare system. I think you heard Chaplain Berry talk about the Family First Prevention Services Act, which will talk about that for the future, and then really end with what you can do, how you can get involved in the child welfare system as a call to action. So without further ado, I think in order to get involved with the child welfare system, or actively engaged, I should say, is you have to be aware of the system itself, what's going on in the system. And many times the child welfare system, people don't know a lot about it in the system on that. It's not advertised much unless there's a tragedy. So I really want to give you a general overview. I think start would kind of show you the volume, the size of the child welfare system in Clark County, Nevada. Now, you heard Chaplain Berry talk about over 500,000 children in the child welfare system in the nation. It's been increasing since 2012. In Nevada, Clark County, specifically Clark County, we have about 3,000 children in foster care. As you indicated, as you heard from the chaplain, we have newborn babies in the foster care system all the way up to 18 or older if they stay in. The average age of children in the foster care system is 8.5. So think about it. 8.5 years old, you may be taken away from your parents and your caretakers to keep you safe, and you're placed in a foster home or other placements on that. Think about the trauma that does and the impact that's going to have on a child on that, as far as being removal and being placed in a different placement. So removal of a child from the home is a traumatic experience in and of itself. So if you think about the youth, if they're in the system, they've been abused or neglected. So they have the trauma from being subject to abuse and neglect, the trauma of being removed from their family many times on that. So when you see in foster care, many of our youth in foster care have mental health issues. And again, many of that is from the abuse they suffered or the neglect they suffered, the trauma of being placed in foster care, placement disruptions. Our children sometimes average about 3 placements or so in the system on that. So many of our foster youth, that studies show that they're 7 times more likely to suffer from depression, 5 times more likely to have anxiety. So of course, it leads to some mental health issues for our youth in the system, which we're really going to address in detail, which I'll talk about some solutions or what we're trying to do to address that. Education becomes an issue in foster care. If the children move from place to place, that can disrupt their education. The studies show that about 50% of youth in foster care actually graduate from high school. In Clark County, I think we're a little bit higher than that. Where last studies I showed maybe about 59 or 60% graduate from high school. For college, only 1 out of 4 foster youth ever enroll in college, and the studies show only about 4% actually get a degree. So you can see the impact being in foster care, and that is not because of lack of foster parents or quality foster parents. It's simply about the victimization or the trauma that you get by being put in the system on that, from your educational needs, your emotional needs, mental health needs. So there's a lot of trauma to these youth and a lot of issues that we need to address once they're in the system. I guess the key is, how do they get in the system? I'll talk a few minutes about that and how they get out of the system and what we're doing when they're in the system to help out, and then what you can do, again, to address this issue. But child welfare is all about safety, right? You remove a child from a home because it's unsafe. So number 1, it's safety. Make sure that we keep these children safe. Number 2 is well-being. We have to address the well-being of this youth, the well-being of the children, their behavioral well-being, their emotional well-being, their social functioning, because those are keys to them understanding and navigating the world in a healthy and positive way. So we need to sit there, really focus on the well-being of our youth in the child welfare system. We need to address the well-being of their cognitive functioning, their physical health and development, their behavioral and emotional functioning, and their social functioning. And again, many of our youth in foster care will have significant issues with social and emotional well-being because of the conditions which led to removal, right? Being subjected to abuse and neglect, to removal itself, which is another traumatic event, and their experiences in foster care. So when you put that all together, the children's well-being, we need to address it as a community and provide these children with all the support we can so we can have healthy, well-adjusted youth and become our community members that become our future generation. So that's the key of our youth, and they're entering the system. So they're entering the system. We have issues that we need to address with our youth. Talk about the volume. We talked about 3,000 youth in the system in Clark County, Nevada only. Yearly, there's about 27,000 calls into our hotline and our emergency line reporting concerns about child abuse and neglect. Think about that, 27,000 calls a year. It's about 2,250 a month. I'm trying to address those calls on that. Department of Family Services does about 1,000 investigations or 1,000 assessments for abuse and neglect. We like to call assessments instead of investigations because it's not criminal. It's to help these families. They do about 1,000 a month. So think about that volume. And out of that, maybe about 90 to 100, they substantiate as abuse and neglect, and those children make come into the foster care system. So it's an overwhelming task if you look at the volume itself, let alone having 3,000 children in the system in Clark County at any time. Why do they come in the system? In It's neglect. I would say neglect is about 80% of the reason our children come in the system. And that neglect can be physical neglect, lack of shelter, food, clothing, things like that, inadequate supervision, young children not being supervised, roaming the neighborhood, young children in diapers sometimes and barefoot, not being properly supervised, emotional neglect, when the family really is not attached to the child with nurturing or affection. So about 80% is neglect. About 15% is physical abuse, where the youth come in for physical abuse, being physically abused by their parents or their caretaker, and maybe 5% sexual abuse that, again, ties in trafficking that we'll talk a little bit about with our panel. The underlying cause for neglect is parental substance abuse. That's the major cause to the children coming in the child welfare system. Their parents have opioid. You've heard all the studies on opioid, the overdoses of opioid. Last I saw that the opioid deaths was 3 times the deaths from automobile accidents across the country last year, and twice as much as gun violence deaths resulting from gun things. So think about the opioid epidemic. It's really increasing our child welfare. It's going from opioids now, meth, heroin. So substance abuse is a major cause. So we can focus on substance abuse and mental health, key components to our child welfare system. We can really help out our families and our children. In those substance abuse, our studies show about 50% of those parents also have mental health issues. Sometimes we cannot identify it at the beginning because they have a drug addiction, so we have to get them clean so we can get a good assessment as a mental health. But even nationwide, it shows about the substance abuse being a primary cause of entry into the system, and about 50% of those will have mental health as well. So you got those co-occurring disorders. So that's really, to me, a major emphasis for child welfare. It's really the mental health and the substance abuse. And we focus on those two, we could significantly reduce the amount of children entering the child welfare system. When they enter the child welfare system, there's certain rights we have to do. Showing my screen on that, it's called the Foster Care Bill of Rights. What happens when a youth comes in the system? What are their rights? This Nevada Bill of Rights, this was put together by our youth, the foster and adoptive youth together organization. They drafted this. It was Assembly Bill 154. It became effective October 1st, 2011. And it's one of the most expansive Bill of Rights for youth in foster care. And we're going to kind of highlight some of the part, but we'll make sure you have a copy of that for your own review. I just want to highlight some of those issues in the Nevada foster care. And again, this was put together by our foster youth. They drafted it. They represented it before the Assembly and got the support for it. And of course, it was approved 100%. Everyone voted in favor of it at the legislature. What are some of their rights? Well, the right to live in a safe, healthy, stable environment. That's why they were moved to begin with, right? It was unsafe. Key, the right to be placed with your siblings whenever possible. We call that a sibling presumption. If you think about it, many of the children that have been neglected or abused look to one of the siblings as been their primary caretaker, and many times removal or separation from the siblings is equally or more traumatic than removal from the parents. So they do have a right for siblings to be placed together, a right to stay in a home with a relative or stay in your own home if it's safe. We call that the relative or family preference. And the siblings to stay together is a presumption. And those were addressed because of the concerns of children coming in child welfare with siblings being separated, unnecessarily being removed from their parents, and then not being placed with a relative. So they absolutely have the right to stay together with their siblings and to stay with family if it's safe to do so. Their right to be treated with dignity and respect, right? To be treated normal, right? To be treated like any child and not to be locked in rooms. To go to religious services and activities of their choice or refuse to go. We need to recognize that from the faith, that they have the absolute right to maintain the religious practices or not go to religious practices if it's not of their faith. Important right to do the right to be told about what's going on in their case, the right to be involved in court, to let the court know what they want, independent living when they get to the age of 15. So you see the rights they have. And again, these are important because they're addressing the concerns our foster youth had that were in the system or had exited out of the system. Education. First, there's our family rights. Of course, if they're not together with your siblings, you have absolute right for reasonable visitation with your brothers and sisters and other family members, unless there's a reason it's unsafe to do so. School rights. We talked about the education. The studies show that youth in foster care, if they are disrupted in placement, and in Clark County, we had about an average of 2 to 2.5 placements for our foster youth. Each disruption in placement can lose up to 6 months of education, so they can fall behind in education. So they have the absolute right to stay in their school of origin. The school they are in prior to being placed in foster care, they have the right to maintain in that school of origin, again, to make sure we can the continuity of their education. And again, these rights were put together because of the issues that our youth face and our families face when in a child welfare system, to go to school every day, to participate in extracurricular activities, right? To normalcy, to be involved in the sports or anything that they want to be involved with. So that is what we have with the foster care for our youth on that. And this is put together by the youth so that they can see the needs we had on that to address those issues. Let me see how to get out of this, and we'll move on, I guess, to, let me see. There we go. I'm getting pretty good with this. So you saw those issues on that. Again, they come in for abuse and neglect, primary reason, mental health, substance abuse, right? And then their educational needs and staying together with family and with their siblings whenever possible. The issue is what happens in the system on that. There is a dire need in our community for substance abuse services for our family and the youth as needed. Mental health, definitely. We have a dramatic shortage of mental health services for our adults and our youth in Clark County, Nevada. So the real issue is how can we address those major causes of children entering child welfare system and basic substance abuse and mental health. We do have, I think, as Mr. Bartel, Michael has said on that, I do oversee the family treatment court. What that is to address parental addiction and mental health. We have a family treatment court that provides intensive, no cost to the family. It's intensive outpatient for treatment. It's inpatient if they need inpatient. We have beds available for inpatient. If they need inpatient, when they complete inpatient, we have transitional sober living, so they can have transitional housing while they're transitioning back into the community. After the transitional, we have in-home services. If the children are home, and keep those children home, giving in-home services. So that whole key was to address substance abuse and mental health, which is a primary reason for children entering the child and keep those children with family safely and out of child welfare system. So we do try to address those major causes of the neglect, drugs, and mental health. We also figure we need to assist the families. They do the Quality Parenting Initiative. What that is, it's indicating that every child has an absolute right to have excellent parenting every day of their life, whether with the parents or in foster care in the child welfare system. They need consistent, excellent parenting with strong, meaningful relationships. And that's the key. We need to foster those relationships, maintain those relationships. We want to strengthen parenting, to work with the parents so we get those children home to the parents and help them strengthen their parenting skills by working together as a community with our providers, our Department of Family Services, our parenting providers, our clergy, the whole community. What can we do to work together to help out this family with their parenting skills to build and repair those relationships? Those relationships have been damaged by the abuse and neglect and being removed. So we want to repair that relationship, build that quality of care for these children. And that takes everybody, the child welfare professionals, relatives, foster parents, adoptive parents, youth advocates. We have some of our youth involved in that, service providers, our human services agencies to work together to get quality parenting so we get these children home safely and with their family. Quality parenting, our goal is to reduce the number of change of placements. Can we keep those children in that same placement, or preferably can we keep them home safely? Can we make sure our siblings stay together and increase reunification? Can we keep the children home or get them home and permanent placements in a more timely manner? So that's the kind of some of the ways we try to address those issues of the foster care. I'm going to spend a few minutes on exiting and then kind of sum up of what you can do. 60% of our children go home to their parents. So that's 6 out of 10 in child welfare end up going back home to their parents or their primary caretakers. So that makes it very imperative that we do strengthen these families, give them the skills they need, help them overcome their addictions, address their mental health, so then we can have raised healthy children to make our community stronger around that. So you think about 6 out of 10 go home. We did last year, I think about 570 adoptions. So some children exit the system through being adopted. So we always need foster and adoptive parents to help our children that don't go home. We have children that age out. That means they turn 18. We don't have permanency on that. They age out of the system. That's a failure by us. We have not found them permanent homes. The data is not good for children that age out. They don't have that base. They don't have that community support. And many times end up with homelessness or in jail on that. So that's our last desired thing, is to age out of the system. We really want to find safe, permanent homes for these children, and about 7% through guardianship. A family member becomes a guardian, it goes in the system. So they exit to reunification, adoption, guardianship, or age out of the system. And again, that has issues on that. What are we doing about it? We've looked and said we need to change our child welfare system. We need to take a step back. We've been doing it the same way for 30 years. We need to relook at it. So they came up with what they call the Family First Preventive Services Act. I think you heard Chaplain Berry talk a little bit about that at the beginning. What that was passed federal law, February 9th, 2018. It was to put funding in. Instead of funding into foster care, can you prevent the children from coming into the system to begin with? Children that were candidates for foster care, can we keep them out of the system by doing preventive services? And how they take that funding, provide enhanced support to the children and families to prevent foster care by doing what? Providing mental health, substance abuse programs to prevent it, and also to provide treatment on that in-home parenting skills, in-home treatment for the families to really say, can we keep the children at home safely by providing services at the front end? And that's what Family First is all about. That's a major change in the funding of the foster care system on that. So we're hoping that will be very successful. In conclusion, I want to spend the last couple of minutes. The key is a call to action. As you heard the mayor say, that if you identify one way that you can make a difference. How can you make a difference? Well, get involved. You can become what we call a court. I don't know if you're able to see that. You able to see the screen? Let me see. You become a CASA volunteer. And again, there's handouts there for you. A CASA volunteer is a court-appointed special advocate. It takes no special skills to be a CASA. You can get involved. There's the information there for how to contact CASA. And basically, you're a voice for that child. You show up at court. You speak up for that child. You meet with that child. You help that child, and you help the child to achieve safety, well-being, and permanency. And I think the great thing is one of our CASA said, you start out to change a child's life and find out you've changed your own. So that's one way you can actually get involved, a CASA volunteer. Of course, that takes a lot of time and commitment, but that's one way you can get involved. You can also get involved to support in the foster care system. Maybe you can become a foster parent. That's a big time commitment. A lot of training you go through on that, but there's different types of foster care. You can be a foster care parent. You could be in I-care. That's where your emergency placement. for up to 30 days. You're not going to have the child for extended period of time, just up to 30 days to help the child out initially while we find a more permanent placement for the child. Advanced foster care, dealing with children with significant emotional issues on it, but you can become a foster parent. You can provide respite care. That's where you have a child placed in your home for a couple of weeks to give the foster parents a break or their parents a break. You become a recruitment ambassador. You can tell people about the need for foster parents and encourage them to get involved. You can be an educational advocate. That's where you educate through the Legal Aid Center of Southern Nevada for our youth to make sure our foster youth are getting the educational needs that they're entitled to. Border Point Special Advocate, talk about mentorship. Big brother, big sister. Volunteer at Child Haven or other programs to help out a child. Sponsor a child. Help pay for a child's extracurricular activities. Maybe they want the basketball camp or band camp. Donate goods. We have Peggy's Attic, which is clothing and stuff for children on that. Donate. And at least we can do is that we start out with to raise awareness, right? Pass on this information about the needs of children in foster care and get them engaged to help support that. So hopefully we have done that for you today, a little bit of raising awareness. And I think the real key in conclusion is that we're hopefully that we can call to action. Hopefully you're aware now, the child welfare system, that'll be more detailed in part 2 with our Department of Family Services on that. But hopefully I've encouraged you to really get engaged, to become actively engaged in the inclusion. Today, we will be having questions on the panel, so any questions, feel free for all your time. I appreciate it. I think it's back to.
Thanks so much, Judge Sullivan. Yeah, thanks so much. For those who are on, all our participants right now, those who are attending, feel free to put in the chat over there your questions. Got a lot of great information here with the judge, and I just want to reiterate, the value of these type of conversations, and then, like the judge was saying, get involved. Right? There's a lot of ways to get involved. That's one of the things about the Mayor's Faith Initiative. We'll come back around later and let you know more information on is these areas of addiction and education and homelessness and human trafficking and strengthening the family are all and mental health are all subcategories of the Mayor's Faith Initiative, and you're going to have an opportunity to be a part of that. So when all these things overlap as heavily as they do, as you're hearing, through these presentations, and you want to get involved, then you're going to want to be active with the Mayor's Faith Initiative. I know there's a lot of things in this community that are consistent, youth hockey, things like what the judge was saying, so that the preventative piece becomes, the key in all of this. And we'll discuss that more later, but a lot of amazing information in this first presentation. And as you're chewing on that and listening to our next great presenter, I just want to let you know you can leave your questions in the chat box. And at the end, we're going to bring everyone together again and sort through those questions and have more information for you there. And so thank you very much, Judge Sullivan. Our next presenter, I go back a few years with him, and very excited that he agreed to be a part of this. He comes all the way to us from Texas, but I met him at a national conference on foster and orphan care, and his reputation preceded him. I had heard a lot about him before I had ever met him in person. And when we were going into finding presenters for this, I just really believed Bishop Aaron Blake needed to be a big part of it, and he agreed. Again, all the stuff that each of our presenters has done is long. In fact, we have sent to you, if you haven't received it already, check your email boxes, all the materials that you are seeing on the screen today, and the ways to support foster care children and all the documents that you'll see, you'll have access to, as well as the bios of all the speakers, so you can dig a little deeper, into those bios as well. But one of the things I love about Bishop Aaron Blake is he he's a doer, right? He puts his money where his mouth is, and man, do I love people like that. And this issue has become near and dear to his heart, for personal reasons as well as his passion. Knowing as people engage, lives can be changed and transformed. Communities can be altered among the vulnerable and those who are being neglected and being abused in their homes. And I'll give you a chance to read yourselves his full bio, but he's been working at this since the mid 80s. Lots of programming he started. I will say this, one of the verses I've always heard him say is, he said, learn to do what is right, seek justice, defend the oppressed, take up the cause of the fatherless, and plead the case of the widow. And that's what we're doing today, learning how we can be active in doing that. But I want to introduce to you Bishop Aaron Blake, who has his fingers over all sorts of things that have spanned into 27 different states now and are growing from a simple act of saying, yes, I'm going to be the person who does this to begin with. It has expanded into 27 states. And so welcome, Bishop Aaron Blake. I'll let him give a little bit of his own history, and looking forward to learning from you today, Bishop Blake. We'll give our technology another second here. I hear you.
Okay. All right. I'm sorry about that. Thank you for allowing me to be with you today. It's exciting to be here. I was one of the things that God has allowed Mary and I, my wife, to do in these 20 years that Harvest Family Life has been in existence. And in the 40 years of ministry and almost 50 years of marriage, have allowed us to personally experience this walk with vulnerable families and youth that come from hard places. From a perspective of clergy, and from the perspective of someone that feels a call to the community, we felt compelled by the entry of 6 boys from the foster care system that came into our lives when one of the young men came to me and said, as I was a bivocational pastor working for the school district, said, Bishop Blake, will you help me? Those very words literally changed our lives, and our lives have been rocketed into this orbit called in the church world orphan care ever since then. So 20 years ago, I stood in front of our church and I quoted the numbers that were in the foster care system at that time, which was close to 30,000, which is in Texas, which is, those numbers are very similar to now. And I said, who will stand with us to care for vulnerable children and families? And one lady stood up in the back of our church, and then that triggered a number. Well, I didn't really mean for them to physically stand up, but she did and raised her hand as though she was volunteering for action. And that she did. She is still an adoptive mom to this day after 20 years, and many are still fostering. What that did in our church, that triggered a ministry and a movement that we now call the Church to Child movement through Harvest Family Life. Our goal is to engage, equip, and empower the local church, regardless of where it may be, regardless of how many that may be in that congregation, to care for vulnerable children and families. Now, this phrase, vulnerable children and families, works from prevention to intervention to transition with preservation being one of the main catalysts in the whole thing, family preservation. We knew that unless we go upstream, that there was not going to be enough families that we can recruit in foster care and adoption to take care of the numbers that would come in to the system. So we began to work with churches and with communities, with vulnerable families in the school system. And we also have now begun to work with the police department and with judges in children's court and drug court and those areas, because if we could provide family wraparound and some sources and some resources, just simple things like working with a mom and showing her that there's somebody walking alongside you to help you with some areas of care for a child. A young mom who may not know and may not have anyone there. So we began to look at what we're doing called, just life coaches, just teaching a young mom how to do life with 3 kids that she may not have had the experience of even as when she was a child to have that existence. And then we also want to look and work on how we can help wrap around through the church, providing some opportunities in the church that was beyond just foster and adoption. Sometimes we would go into a church and we ask who would help us with families, and they think we're talking about foster and adoption. We have created a document. It was 25 ways on how a person within a church congregation can be involved in family preservation. In foster care and adoption, those are another areas that we want to be involved in particular with kinship care, working with grandmas and aunts and uncles and wrapping around those who's taken on the responsibility of caring for children, but at a level of knowledge that they may not understand the trauma that the children have been through, and understand trauma-informed care. We also realize that most of our children that come in care come from poverty. And so if they come from poverty, then our goal was to go into those communities where those kids come from. That brought in the school system that I mentioned. That brought in law enforcement when they go out on a call and they see some things that maybe because they are working in upholding the law, their hearts are broken, but they have to walk away. But we have, through a system, the Care Portal and others, that law enforcement can call us, can text us, or can put a request in the Care Portal. School systems can do the same thing. We started Care Portal about 8 years ago, and now it's extended to 27 states. But we work in the community with law enforcement, with judges, with CASA, with agencies, and what we call a CAB, a Community Advisory Board, and every quarter with a CCAB, and that is a Clergy Community Advisory Board. Can you imagine agencies getting together and meeting with pastors and meeting with the community and say, how can we work together in tandem, bringing the resources into the community, and the community knows and the agencies knows how they can work together. Can you imagine working with judges and drug court and other courts and children's court, and they understand the community, and the community understands what's happening to children and families in their community. I want to tell you, I was a pastor for 20 plus years back then, and I had never been to a children's court. Didn't even know a children's court existed in my county. But when I found out, I went to court. And when I went to court, I also took pastors with me. And I said, pastors, just go sit and hear what's happening in your community. When they did, they asked this question: what's going to happen to the child? I said, many of them have plans, but they're not the ones who really would know. They said, what's going to happen to the mom? What's going to happen to the dad? And I said, Pastor, do you know who really would know that answer? You and I. We live in those communities with those children. We live with those parents. We live with those situations. We can be one of the answers to solving the problem of families in crisis. And we started Clergy in Court for Kids. Well, I want you to know that in beginning these areas and these interventions, it always takes an area of collaboration at a high level. And that high level means that churches, communities, judges, law enforcement, schools, and everyone has to realize that it takes a village to raise a child. And this village that we're talking about, they're there, and those folks are there, and everybody is looking for one another. Everybody's looking. Well, how can we go into churches? Many agencies ask me that question. How can we be a wraparound support effectively for families? And many agencies ask. Well, I believe it's when we can be able to sit down and we begin to say, here's the services that we provide, and how can we tie those services together? Well, that's what Harvest Family Life and the Church to Child, what we believe to be a movement, can do and will do. One thing I do know how to talk to pastors, because I've been one a long time. And I can call a pastor up and say, Pastor, we have a crisis in the community, and that is the crisis with children and families. We have crisis in the community of sex trafficking. We have a crisis in community with children aging out of care without a permanent family, without a support system. We have a crisis in the community of young moms not knowing and not having the support that they need to be able to navigate with 2 or 3 children, unemployment, and all the things that happens in communities that is bound with those kinds of circumstances. So the response to that in a church setting is a scripture that I quote all the time to churches. James 1:27 says, pure and undefiled religion is to care for the widows and orphans in their distress. I also quote in churches in Matthew 25 that says, when I was hungry, you fed me. When I was naked, you clothed me. When I was sick, you came to see about me. When I was in prison, you visited me. And then the disciples asked, when did we see you naked, in prison, sick? And Jesus responded to them, when you've done it unto the least of my little ones, you've done it also unto me. So I believe that the mandate scripturally and qualifies the church to be in this area of child welfare and family preservation and family intervention, and also working with children and youth before they go into the system, and definitely before they age out of care. We know that the numbers are great when it comes to the pipeline from foster care to incarceration and prison. We know that there is a correlation between foster care and those children, and early pregnancy and dropout rates are higher amongst. We know those numbers in the sense of the professional world. But when we take the same numbers and take them to the community and take them to the church, there are people who have hearts already prepared to respond. And we believe the church in the community is one of the answers to solving the orphan care crisis. We believe that with organized approaches from child welfare to judges to law enforcement to school officials and all child placing agencies and so on, CASA, we believe that when we come together and say that we can form community for those who don't know, don't have community, don't have wraparound, don't have support, that we can then create the kind of safety nets that's needed for children and children in crisis. So that's much of the area in which we operate. We are Harvest Family Life. We created Stand Sunday. Stand Sunday is the first Sunday in November, and which is Adoption Month. Where, and if you Google Stand Sunday, you can find there across the country, churches are standing up in November and saying that we are promoting adoption and foster care and wraparound for families. You can also go to careportal.org, and that's another area of ministry that we started that is around the country. And soon, but very soon, we hope that clergy in court is going to be across the country, to where courts and judges could come together with the community and churches and begin to do some things together upstream and in the midst, so children can go back home and be with family. Children rather be with family, and families, healthy families, that is, need wraparound support so they can go home to bio families. We thank you for listening, and if there's any way that we can support or answer any question, we'll be glad to do that.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Tech issues, I got to make sure. All right. So we're going to have Bishop Blake come back here after the last as part of our panel, which we're going to have a 4-person panel beyond a 3-person panel, but a lot of great information there. And hopefully you are sending your questions for each of the presenters or to the presenters as a whole into the chat box over here. And you know, you got your chance to sharpen your iron on some of the best practitioners this country has to offer in this field. And so start sending your questions in. We'll start processing them so we can kick them out at the end of this next presentation, which I'm also excited about. Dr. Christina here, we've been interacting here and there kind of like this over the last few years. Man, she is just dynamite. And she is currently the Chief Executive Officer of St. Jude's Ranch for Children, one of the country's best not-for-profits for sure. She has more than 2 decades of professional and progressive human and social service experience that includes developing and administering programs for children, youth, and transition-age youth that are victims of abuse and neglect, human trafficking, and experiencing youth homelessness. I'm really looking personally forward at the end to be asking some of those questions on those aging out of this system and the vulnerability that lies there as well. And I'm very excited for that. You can look at her extensive and amazing list of accomplishments. I'm looking forward to listening to her, learning from her, and formulating some of my own questions on the back. So Christina, thank you so much for being willing to present today. We're looking forward to hearing from you.
Great. Thank you so much. It's really a pleasure and honor to be here with you all today. You know, I'm grateful to learn from so many people. And as we've heard this morning, well, let me double check. Can you all hear me okay? I hope so. I can't see anybody. Can you all hear me? Somebody?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay, perfect. Great. Thank you. As we've heard a lot of incredible information this morning from, of course, Judge Sullivan, who I've had a long, been working with him for a long time, and of course, Bishop Blake for his incredible insight. We've heard a lot about the realities of what it's like for children and families that are part of the foster care system, and our families and children that come from hard places. Before we go too far into my presentation, I actually want to take a little bit of a different perspective. I want to ask you to consider what it's like to be a child from hard places. A child that is part of this big system that we've been talking about. Maybe a child that is actually in foster care currently today. Perhaps you can relate because you had similar life experiences. Maybe you yourself have experienced some trauma in your life. Maybe you've been working with children that are, as part of your profession for many years. Maybe you're a foster parent or a caregiver or a parent. Maybe you're a community advocate. But regardless of how long we've been doing the work, I think it's critical that we consider what it's like to be a child who's experiencing this world that's happening all around them. And so in order to do that, I would like to I'm going to show a quick 5-minute video, and it's part of a longer video. I know after this event, there's a couple handouts that I'm going to have sent out and my PowerPoint. So don't worry, we'll share all that information with you after this. But the video, I just want to give a little bit of a warning, a trigger warning. It's not easy to watch. It's not direct in your face, but there's a lot of things implied in this short 5 minutes that I'm going to show you of this film. The truth can be hard to watch, but the truth is it's harder for the children that have to live it. And so as the adults in the world trying to make it better, and for the adults that we have the privilege and honor and quite honestly the responsibility to make it better for children and young people, I ask you to not look away, right? To spend these 5 minutes with me watching this video, so that we can anchor ourselves in a shared perspective. My goal at the end of the presentation is, of course, to leave us with a sense of hope about what is possible. But in order to get there, of course, we have to see it from a child's eye. So some of you may have seen this video. If you have, bear with me. Let's just watch it together for 5 quick minutes. So I'm going to share my screen. And I always worry. Okay, we're good. All right. Here we go.
Sometimes someone hurts you so bad. It stops hurting at all. Sometimes something makes you feel good. And then it all comes back. I'm going to pause for a second because it sounds like you all can't hear the video. Can somebody come on and tell me?
We couldn't hear that
We
portion,
can only hear a few.
Christina. So if there's some,
Be able to hear it.
So when you muted me, I think it mutes my computer.
okay.
Can we test this one more time? Can I play? Okay. Can you hear it that way?
It's paused again. hit play. So I'm not hearing anything right now if there's audio.
Okay. Well, that's too bad. All right.
Do you want to try to send me the video, put the link in, and I can share it?
Yes. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. It is a powerful film. So let me send it over real quick. I don't think this will take too long. Jordan, let me send this to you. Actually, Jordan, if you go on YouTube, I'll send you the link also. Sorry, everybody, right? This is what happens with technology. We've learned through the pandemic to be very flexible, right? So thank you all for your quick moments of patience. Take a quick drink of your water. I'm going to send this to you real quick. I guess I should have thought to do that separately, but here it is. Okay. Share. All right, Jordan, I just sent it to you, so it should get there quickly. Sorry, everyone. This happens, right? Just when you think you've got it. Okay, Jordan, I just sent that to you. So let's see real quick if it can come up. If not, we can move on without it. But I'm sure maybe even just from seeing the, yes, Jordan, I sent it via email. Seeing the images, it's a really powerful film. It does sit on YouTube and it's called Removed. And we've got a link that will send it to you later so that you can watch it. It is part of a larger documentary series. I feel like the film just does such a good job of helping kids or helping us really be in that perspective of what it's like to be a child when the system's sort of happening around them. So let me check one more time if you've received it. If not, we'll just have to move on. I know we have limited time. Yay. Yeah, let's restart it. Thank you. Oh, I can't hear it on your end now. Huh. Anybody have any suggestions? If not, we're gonna have to go on without it, but
Dr. Vela, sometimes on Zoom, you have to click on audio, but I don't know in this system if that's the case, but I know that on Zoom you do.
okay. All right, well, I guess we'll go on without the video. So I'll regroup a little bit. So Jordan, can you give me share capacity again? And I will just go to my PowerPoint. So I apologize, everybody. The presentation is really powerful. So we'll definitely make sure that you get a copy of it so that you can watch it on your own. It's a really powerful demonstration of what it's like to be a child. So I'm going to skip through a little bit of the presentation because I was going to talk about, so this little girl that you're seeing on my image or on my screen, her name is Zoe. And the documentary shows what it's like to be removed from her unsafe home and to go into a foster home and then to another foster home and then to another foster home. Initially, she was separated from her brother, and it's pretty devastating to see the two of them separated. And you see the social worker showing up and removing her from one home to another, especially because a young person in pain oftentimes has nothing else to control other than their behavior. And so, oh yeah, thank you, Jordan. The link is in the information. So one of the things I was going to talk about was, you know, what happens to a child that is 8 or 9 or 10 years old and has come into foster care and is changed multiple times, right? So there's placement disruptions for different reasons, that there is just challenges that happen, and that Zoe, in this particular instance, moves foster homes at age 8, and then 9, and then 10, and then 12. And every time Zoe has a new foster care placement, she has to change schools. And every time she changes schools, her behavior becomes more challenging because she's so hurt. And then let's just imagine that Zoe starts cutting herself and having emotional outbursts at age 13. And then she gets removed from the hospital and she goes to our local emergency shelter. And even though there are people that care about Zoe, she feels so alone in the world. And so what if within 3 hours of being in the emergency shelter, she meets a new friend? And that new friend tells her, I'm going to run away in a few minutes. Do you want to come with me? And Zoe already feels alone in the world. And she already thinks she can't trust anybody. And she refuses to go to another foster home because she's worried that what will happen, that she'll be rejected again. And so what happens? Well, Zoe and Sarah run away and they meet a guy named Brian. And Brian seems nice. He takes the girls to eat, and then he takes Zoe to buy some new clothes, and then he provides Zoe with a safe place to live. And after about a week of them hanging out together and everything looks great, Brian takes her off shopping and says, we're going to go to my friend's party later tonight. Do you want to go? And Zoe has no idea. She says yes. She gets all dressed up. She's feeling so pretty, and she's feeling loved by this guy who's, taking a liking to her. And they get to this party and he tells her before they walk in, now, you owe me money. And Zoe says, what do you mean? He says, I've fed you. I've taken you shopping. And we're going to go into this party and we're going to have a good time. And whatever happens, you just go with it. And she has no idea when she walks into the party that she is the party. What do I mean by that? Well, maybe Brian has been grooming her to be a victim of child sex trafficking, and Zoe had no idea until she was in the middle of a really dangerous and violent situation. This is the reality for children that we care for at St. Jude's Ranch for Children. It's also the kids that come in and out of our courts. It's who LVMPD works so hard to protect, our child welfare partners. This is the truth. But what if Zoe had one caring adult in her life, and the video, the movie removed, and I saw somebody talk about, I know CASA and different people show the film removed because it's so powerful to talk about what one person can make all the difference for the child. What's possible when we help children start to feel safe? So that's part of the question. So I believe that we can find pathways to hope and healing. It's not an easy pathway for children and for families, but indeed, I do think it is possible. Today, my goal is to briefly talk about some realities of child adversity, to talk a little bit about what we know about child sex trafficking, to briefly talk about the work we're doing at St. Jude's Ranch for Children, and at the end, of course, to hopefully inspire each and every one of you to recognize that no matter where you are in the system, as a community member, as a parent, as a neighbor, as an auntie or uncle of children, of grandparents, that we all have children in our lives that we can inspire hope and healing. All right, so what does all of this mean? So I believe that there is this intersectionality that exists between children that have experienced adverse childhood experiences, that are part of the juvenile delinquency system, that are experiencing youth homelessness, and indeed, experiencing child sex trafficking. So right in the middle here, we have a trauma victim. So that young person, it could be a child. Now, we all know we can all experience trauma in our lives. The death of a loved one is traumatic. Being in a terrible, serious car accident can be traumatic. But this particular image is to think about children at heightened risk. And so we know that kids that have adverse childhood experiences in that pink bubble, that have foster care and a lack of healthy connections as one of their lived experiences, has this sort of heightened experience of not, of feeling like they're not worthy of love, and engage in high-risk behavior like juvenile delinquency-related activity. And we know when children are involved with police all these things, it continues to traumatize children, oftentimes because of their behavior, but their behavior, the root of the problem is the pain in their heart and feeling alone in the world. We know that youth homelessness in the yellow is oftentimes an outcome of kids running away from their pain, running away from unhealthy situations. And we know that when children run to the streets, their vulnerability goes up. We know that children, just don't understand how vulnerable they are. And then indeed, we know the impact of child sex trafficking. So I looked at the time and oh my gosh, the little waiting of time threw me off. So I want to talk for a few moments. I hope it's okay that I'm going to go a little bit longer. I am really cognizant of the time. But the tip of the iceberg, when we talk about child sex trafficking, we know as a community, we know some information, but I want to offer as an image that what we don't know is all the things that are hidden in this community and in the world. And it's really important to recognize what we see is only a fraction of the truth. So human trafficking, well, what is it? I mean, we know it's sex trafficking. We know it's forced labor and domestic servitude. It is happening everywhere in the planet. It is happening everywhere in the country of the United States. It's happening it can happen to anyone, no matter of race, age, or gender. We know, as I said, it's happening across the United States. Human trafficking is a highly profitable crime. I read something like $185 billion industry. And what I want to offer to you is I know that we may probably never dismantle human trafficking across the planet, but I promise you it matters to the one child every day that we can protect, right? Even if just one child, it makes a difference in their life and the exponential impact on the future of the world, right? Because then they grow up and they be their parents and they have children, right? So I just want to offer, I know this is a huge global problem, but for that one child, it matters. 40.3 million victims of human trafficking around the world have been identified. And again, that's the tip of the iceberg. We know that LVMPD, we're so grateful that LVMPD gave access to Arizona State University to do an 8-year exploratory study in Las Vegas, specifically about child sex trafficking. And we know that in those 8 years, 922 child victims were identified. Again, the tip of the iceberg. That's already concerning. Any one child is too many, but this is concerning because we know there's so many kids that are being victimized that have not come to LVMPD's attention. So what do we know about that? Well, we see that the average age was from age 11 to 17. Disproportionately, girls or females are trafficked, but please understand males and transgendered young people are also at heightened risk. We see in some of the data points that our Black and brown children are disproportionately affected. We know that many children have been a victim of have been awarded the state, meaning they've been in foster care. Almost 64% of these victims had a history of running away. So, they're running places and predators, and traffickers are finding them. And only 40% of victims had a missing persons report filed on them, which is pretty concerning. Well, that was my 20 minutes. Couple other things. Our kids are experiencing unprecedented amounts of violence. This data from the report shows kidnapping and psychological violence and physical violence and sexual violence, and really painful. 7% of these child victims have experienced strangulation. Any one child is too much, but this is very concerning. We know, how did these cases get identified? Well, in every way possible. Of course, our law enforcement partners, security officers at hotels and casinos or different places, people called 911 for help, or they called a family member. So the question is, might they call you, right? They could call me. Domestic violence calls, healthcare providers. So there's a ton of data. We'll make sure that you get access to that. So who's at risk? All kids and young people because of social media. Kids are naive, but children at heightened risk, we know, are child victims of trauma that lack a healthy family or support system. So I ask you to stand up for children. There is no excuse for child abuse. Here at St. Jude's Ranch for Children, I'll wrap quickly to talk about the work we're doing. We are on a mission to transform the lives of abused and neglected children and young people by providing two things: hope and healing. We have a whole array of programs that we're very proud of having. We certainly wish we could work ourselves out of a business, but until that day, we're here linking arms with many service providers to provide critical services that can, of course, change the direction of children's lives. Our response to child sex trafficking is to leverage our history of providing over 50 years of care to children and young people with complex trauma. We have a beautiful thing called resource like land, and we have an amazing amount of partnerships. And so we are embarking on creating the first of its kind residential campus for child victims of sex trafficking. The place will be called the Healing Center. Here's a map of our current 40 acres. You can see we have a lot of dirt and a lot of space to grow. The Healing Center, as mentioned, will be a one-of-a-kind project to care specifically for child victims of trafficking ages 10 to 18, so children, so that we can bypass places like detention and emergency shelters that might not be fully equipped to deal with this population. These are some of the incredible images that our architect have created for us. All of this sits on our website with the virtual tour. Some beautiful images here of an incredible place of hope and healing, a place of restoration, a place so that children and young people can move from being a victim to being a survivor and then to thriving in the world. This is an image of the school in partnership with Clark County School District. We'll be creating a beautiful school setting with an alternative educational plan for victims. This is what it might look like if you're walking around the courtyard. Again, a beautiful place of healing. So where do we go from here? Well, I ask you to be aware of children around you and in your workplace, and to understand that as we try to extend compassion to children and young people, it's about us being realistic with each other about how hard it is to be a child in this day and age. I'm grateful that I didn't grow up with social media, and many of you probably laugh about that too, but the truth is our children are. And so how can we create a sense of compassion and kindness for young people? How can we talk to children about protecting their bodies, about talking to children about the realities of sex trafficking without scaring them that the world is some horrible place? But can we set a high standard of love in our home and in our relationships? Paying attention to children is a really important part of this. Helping children stay active, helping your kids volunteer and provide to other kids is a really important part. There is place for all of us in helping children have the healthiest and happiest life possible. Before I go, I'll make sure you have all my contact info. We are, let's see, let me stop sharing here. We are going to be hosting, April is Child Abuse and Prevention Month. And so on April 21st, we'll also share the details. We're hosting a courageous conversation, a webinar, 1 hour webinar similar to this, to talk about what we know about the realities of child abuse and neglect. And we ask you to join us. So with that, thank you. I apologize for the disruption of the videos not working. I do hope you take a moment to watch those videos. It is very humbling and a great reminder about how important it is for each and every one of us to step up, link arms, to really protect our children and young people. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Christina. Excellent. And just like what she was saying, all the resources you've been seeing, whatever glitches are there or not there, they're going to be available to you. So obviously take full advantage of that. And you're going to be better for it. I mean, those are some of the best things we can do as we gather in a space like this to present is put some of the best resources for your own follow-up in place. And I think we're doing that for you. And that's going to be an ongoing thing, even into the future presentations we have like this. Like I said, we've done a few of these in the past already, one on human trafficking and trauma, which Christina, I want to get back to you and maybe ask a question about trauma and the related pieces to that, with us asking people to be involved in the foster care system, what that might look like. But we also did one on Native American underlying issues pertaining to vulnerability, missing and murdered Indigenous women, and human trafficking. And one of our panelists, I'd like to bring our panelists, if you could all at least throw your beautiful faces up there right now, if you can still stay muted for a second. We're adding a fourth person to this list, Della Frank. She's got her bio was sent to you as well. She's just been a rock star in the community here as far as education, focusing on Native American issues. She was one of our presenters at the last symposium that we did. Della, if you could just take like 2 minutes just to introduce yourself and your connections into the community, and then I'm going to start throwing some questions out there for you guys, and we'll go until we peter out.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for everyone showing up today. What an amazing presentation. That was just amazing. I mean, I learned so much from each speaker. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. I am Della Frank. I am a coordinator for Indian education, and I've been in Indian Ed since 2008. Prior to that, I was working with Indian Health Services on the Moapa Band of Paiute Reservation, going into the homes and working with the elderly and the youth on health and helping them with their well-being. That was my day job, and my night job was I was a youth leader. I pastored at least 20 to 30 young youth from the Moapa Band, and so I was kind of thrown into all of these underlying issues as I was trying to help people on the reservation. So my experience with foster care, again, I feel like I was thrown into that with my job because of all of the, I service 650 students, and the great majority, no, I can't say great majority of them, but a lot of them are in the foster care system. So I'm dealing with students on a daily basis with the foster care system in my job. And then as a chaplain, I'm dealing with that. And I work with Chaplain Berry and Chaplain Bartel on the human trafficking issues. So I'm so proud to be part of that. And we're trying to reach out to the reservations to do presentations on awareness and how poverty and some of the issues that are taking place, and we'll get a little bit more into that here in a little bit, is affecting the youth on reservations. Thank you.
Awesome. So first of all, to the presenters, thank you so much for sharing with us your knowledge. 20 minutes is a tight time frame to cram in the decades worth of work and engagement and personal history with this issue. But you guys did amazing, and I want to unpack a little bit more of it here. And what I want to say to you presenters is feel free yourself to, if you have questions, like you were listening to others presenters and you have some overlapping places that you think we could learn, or even you yourself want to learn a little more about, we got everybody on the line here. So feel free to come up with your own questions and throw it across the screen as it goes. I want to enter this by asking maybe a big picture question. We'll start to unpack a little more from there. Christina said, what's possible when kids begin to feel safe, right? And so when I was thinking that through, and earlier today I was talking with Della, we got a lot of different cultural pieces, even as part of our presentation today. Cultural meaning we got these different sectors of our community. We got the judge representing here. We got Bishop Blake with the faith community. We got not-for-profit doing day-to-day engagement with this. We got the education system. With Della a little earlier on, we had Lieutenant from Metro. All those are unique cultures who interact with these kids and then the families of these kids, which we'll get into more as well, at different levels of brokenness, vulnerability, trouble, whatever that might be. So my question is, given all these unique cultures, What is the starting point, do you think, or maybe the cornerstone for each of these areas for to see child safety be prioritized, right? Meaning, how do we, where we land, prioritize child safety as opposed to saying that's somebody else's issue, whether that's law enforcement toward not-for-profit or a church who hasn't been educated yet on, you know, even some rudimentary mandatory report situations, that's somebody else's issue. How in our areas, in your expert opinions, can we prioritize safety, or where is the starting point to prioritize safety?
I guess I'll take a shot at it. It's kind of a tough question on that. I think as a community, what we don't do well is we don't do preventive services. We react. A child is unsafe, a child's been abused, a child's been neglected, then the system comes out with all the caretakers and all the partners. I think the key, what we need to do is educate to identify that. What happens is families won't reach out for help if they got substance abuse or mental health because they think you take their kids away. You can take their kids away and they may have addiction issues, but they love their kids and the kids love their parents. So I think we don't do a good job with the preventive to get out there. That's the eyes and the ears from the faith-based. If you see a child on that, you see things on that with homelessness or family struggling, like the bishop said, right? Get engaged on that to be resources for that family on that. To educate with the schools about that. Instead of just calling for child abuse neglect, removing the kids, let's get up at the front end and try to put those services so families can reach out. We have programs now with drug addiction when they got a baby, right? That looks like it's a parent has a drug issue. Try to make sure they're getting their prenatal care and then try to educate right then and there instead of waiting for the child to be born and take the child away. Can we get to at the front end, educate those parents about the substance abuse, what it does, and get them services. So I think we really need as a community to identify it through awareness. What are some of the signs, the homelessness and things like that? What are some of the signs that there's risk factors on that, and react to those risk factors as a community response instead of waiting for it to become abuse and neglect? I think that's a real shortcoming is our preventive services. I don't know if my colleagues agree with that or not, or want to chime in.
Well, Judge, you are point on what from the clergy side and from the community side, most of what we're talking about is foreign in the sense of the resources that are available to the community and to the average pastor that goes to seminary, and he goes to seminary and he studies theology, and which is the study of God, and he learns how to lead a congregation. But in my studies in theology, there was nothing to say that taught me how to deal with a child or a family that was in crisis and a child suffering from trauma. Nor was there anything that pointed me to the professionals that were out there that could support the people that could be sitting in my pew, the grandma, the aunt, and whatever they need to understand trauma-informed care. There was no one that was there to let me understand what does a sex traffic victim look like and what is sex trafficking. So those things, happens all in the community, but the education level and the knowledge level of understanding what do you see when you are looking, something looks suspicious, maybe a time to act. So if we can bring all of these services and that they met in a collaborative way frequently, and then took those into the communities, into churches, and that let the community come and have an open dialogue and open training and say, we're here to bring the services to you. Bring a judge into the community and let the community pastors meet. And then you share, Judge, to the community. Here's what I do every day. I welcome you into my court. I welcome you to come listen and hear and respond, as well as Christina. coming and sharing her beautiful presentation in a church. Believe me, if I was in the community where you guys were, I would invite you to come and go with me and let's inform. So information and presentation in these communities, I believe, is key.
Yeah, thank you. I'll offer, I think the question about how do we, what does it look like when kids feel safe or families feel safe? I'll offer that I think there's a lot of different things, but relationships is one of the best interventions we have. Building a relationship with people. And I think that takes us adults and those of us that are privileged enough to not be living a life of crisis to listen and really humble ourselves to talk to people and build relationships and say what we do and do what we say. And especially for children, I know that seeing them, right, and saying, we see you. We might not always like your behavior, but we understand you're in pain, and how we transmit that sense of compassion makes all the difference for a child to feel a little bit of hope every day. And so we never just arrive to when a child is fully trusting us, right? This is a constant relationship building. But planting seeds of hope every day in the lives of others is a really well-worthy investment. And we've seen it. Young people that have faced tremendous adversity and yet still are able to accomplish incredible things. And incredible things could be that they go on to be parents and they keep their children in their custody and are great parents and keep their child safe, or other young people that go off to college. Now, that's not always the norm, but we know, I believe, that what's in the secret sauce of how we help kids and families is healthy relationships where people feel seen and loved and valued as the human beings that we are.
Amen. I'm going to chime in too. I agree with what everyone said. I went to Bible school too, didn't hear a thing. Went to college to be a teacher, didn't hear a thing about foster care, about the needs of children. And it's really, really sad because our teachers especially need to hear that, because they're coming across foster care students every single day. The cultural part of it, because I do work with Indian Ed, they have issues with the jurisdiction and having to be identified as American Indian. Those are issues that we have to overcome when we're dealing with Native students. We have all the high numbers, close to 500,000 kids in foster care. There's about 2% or more of those children are Native American. And when it comes to Clark County School District servicing those foster care students, there's a lot of requirements that we have to go through in order to provide those services. We have to have a CIB card. We have to have a certificate of Indian blood available so they can get services through our program. Johnson O'Malley is the same way. And this is, it's the same thing of getting a student that is special ed and saying, well, I can't service you because I know that you're special ed, but you don't have the proper documentation. That's what I go through with Clark County. I have a lot of foster kids, but I cannot service them with my program, knowing that they're Native, but they don't have the paperwork that follows them. So the collaboration part of it, of us all working together, working with tribal leaders, working with the school district leaders, and talking, and this is something that I'm trying to do on a daily basis, talking to them about some of the issues that I'm seeing on a daily basis, and trying to get them to see that there's hurdles that we have to cross in order to service these kids. They're protected, they're in their tribe, and of course you can't, with ICWA, the Indian Child Welfare Act and stuff like that, the culture is important. And so that's important to us too. I think Dr. Avella, you mentioned something about the brown and the black kids are the ones that are being more vulnerable to human trafficking. And that's true. They deal with the poverty there on the reservations. And so I think awareness and all of us coming together and talking about these issues, and that's exactly what we're doing with this session, And I'm so proud to be here because all of you guys are getting us to that point where we're all talking about it. We're all from different areas, and I think it's a great thing.
Awesome. In a minute here, I do want to get more into that prevention side that we were talking about. Since we're dealing with the faith community here, even though we're overlapping into others, this Mayor's Faith Initiative, I do want to maybe even unpack some more at the different levels of prevention. I don't know if awareness is the right word, or intervention, but an intersection with families, and the strengthening of families piece, as well as, the long term, which will get us into a little bit of trauma. But one of the questions that came up that I want to get to before we get to those other things is, we've talked about foster care system today. Somebody wanted to know what you guys believed. We got the number 3, the 3 greatest challenges facing the actual foster care system. What would those be, right? So what are the 3 challenges that the foster care system faces? We've heard some of that already, even, with what Della just said, but from your guys' perspective, and we got unique perspectives all over the screen here, give me 1 to 3 challenges you think are the biggest ones facing the system.
Well, I'll hop on quick. The 3 that come to mind is needing to address our drug issue. We need drug treatment. I mean, when so many of the cases, and the judge can, probably say this obviously as he did part of his presentation, when we have such a high amount of families facing drug and mental health issues, that's number 1 and 2, mental health and drug treatment. We must help people overcome their addictions and or help address their mental health challenges. And I'll offer the 3rd one that I think is really a hard one to break, is generational cycles of tolerance, of abuse and poverty and neglect. And young people are oftentimes looking around to their loved ones who have lived the same life that they are now living, that's part of the system. And so from a hopeful disposition of building relationships with young people to realize that, helping them, understand that the world is a big place and they can do a lot of things with it. They do actually have choices, but breaking generational curses or generational cycles of foster care, right? The fact that I care for children here at St. Jude's Ranch who say my mom was in foster care, my dad was in foster care, my grandma was in foster care. We have to look at the generational impact and really start to think about how we help young people find pathways out of those cycles. So that's my offer.
This is just something I agree with Dr. Davila on that. Is clearly, from the neglect side, it's mental health and substance abuse co-occurring. There's a lack of services, quality services to help out these families and the children as well. Sometimes there's a lot of waiting lists, right? So we kind of wait. And if you don't get that family engaged from day one, right, the longer that child's in foster care, the more likely the family kind of disappears, gets frustrated, does not get engaged in services. So I think that one of the major challenges is the lack of quality preventive services right at the front end. Can we get this family engaged in the mental health and substance abuse? And again, to me, that's a co-occurring disorder many times. Poverty, I think, as the bishop hit, poverty is a major issue. The department would say we don't remove children because of poverty. That's nonsense. Poverty is an issue on that with homelessness, those issues on that with the services to the family. So I think poverty is a major issue we need to address as a community for foster care as well. And I think the engagement of the family. We are a punitive system. No one will say that on that. We don't engage the family. We come, we take your kids away and tell you what you need to do. We've been trying to change that culture. So we need to change it. Old Child Welfare Council said, family, how can we help you? You've got a drug issue, right? We become aware of it. Instead of pulling the children, can we keep the child safe at home while giving you the services, right? They don't have insurance or we get Medicaid. Medicaid won't cover it. That's all nonsense. Let's get them the services that they don't have to pay for and get them right into home. To have quality people come out to make safety checks on those children. We can have them come out 3 times a day. We get a family come out to check out this. So do an in-home safety plan with the services in place for that family. And that way you can engage that family and they'll reach out for help instead of like, okay, here we come, take your kids away. It becomes very confrontational. They don't trust us, especially children of color. You can say what you want, but if you look at the system on this disproportionality of families and children of color, disproportionately in the child welfare system. And until we address that with the poverty and the fact about really engaging families, we got to keep the children safe, but doesn't mean we can't keep them safe within the home with services in place and safety providers going out there, family going out there and keep that children safe within their environment and then really engage that family and help that family see we're not there to punish you. We're there to help you. Doesn't mean all the kids will stay home. Children have to be removed. No doubt about it, it's unsafe, but I think we need to change that whole culture. And I think it's a major change on that because we've been doing this for 30 years. To try to change that culture is like turning the Titanic, but I think we can do it.
So one of the things that, and as Judge has mentioned, and everyone is the question becomes, how can community engagement and community-based care, how can it happen? Many times, as Judge mentioned, there is a disproportionate number of children of color. There is many of these kids come from communities of poverty. And so the question is, the agencies that typically do the services, many of them do not have a connecting point that leads them into the community, where the community has trust of the entity that they are having intervention. Historical distrust is there when it comes down to child protective services and agencies and law enforcement in those communities. If it's a Hispanic community, if it's an Indian community, if it's an African American community, there's a historical distrust there. But if we know that going in, then why not use, I went fishing a few months ago, and I had never did offshore fishing. So they told me I had to use a different kind of bait than I would use if I was fishing in the tank in my mother-in-law's farm. Well, if you need to use a different bait and think a different way and approach it a different way, then why not stop the train a little bit and let's think differently. One way that I'm advocating is the local church that's already have credibility in the community. Pastors, they already have credibility, and there's a local church in every community across the nation. So that's something consistent. And so I believe that if we say, just stop a minute and say, now, how can we reallocate resources? Now, this is what I mean, reallocate resources. What we do is engage, equip, and empower. The way you empower a community to take care of its own is you bring the resources, the skills, the knowledge, the training, and other resources into the community through the local church in systems that's there in the community, and do it through them. Let me tell you, when I tell people all the time, I used to run the 440 relay back when I was in high school, and we won the state championship. But in one track meet prior to the state championship, I ran second leg, and I dropped the baton. The fastest guy ran anchor. He never got a chance to run because I dropped the baton. Child welfare is dropping the baton because we're not using all of the runners, and especially the one that can bring the children home. That's that anchor guy, so that the children can go home and the children can be taken care of at home. So I believe we just need to understand and revisit the way we're doing things and who we're using in doing it.
I wanted to give my 3 challenges, and I agree with drug addiction being the first challenge. I feel like there's not enough being done about it. It's affecting families. It's affecting my family. So I just wish there was more assistance when it comes to drug addiction and educating our families on how to get that help. Education is the second challenge, especially coming to when it comes to Indian Ed, is a lot of families don't understand what human trafficking is, what the foster care system and all of that. So I know someone mentioned Child Abuse and Awareness Month is April. And I can proudly say that on the Moapa Band Paiute Reservation, we have had a yearly parade every year. It's a small community, but we get out all our pickup trucks and our trailers, and we decorate and we create floats for the education on child abuse and awareness month. So that's a plus for us. We didn't do it for during the time of COVID, but April 11th, I want to invite everybody. It's April 11th on the reservation. We'll have a parade, and I usually do the poker walk at 7 o'clock in the morning, and at 6:30 in the morning we open up with the sunrise prayer. The third one for me is the silence. The people have to speak up. People have to speak up on the reservation. If Uncle so-and-so is hurting niece so-and-so, we've got to speak up. If someone is being harmed physically, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, we have to speak up. We can't sweep it under the rug anymore. And we have to go to people that are going to help. And so I encourage the people on the reservation to speak up, go to your council members, go to your social workers, and tell somebody, please tell somebody that kids are getting hurt. Thank you.
Yeah, man, this is all just excellent stuff. I mean, the weight of every individual thing we're talking about today, underlying issues, everything is just so huge. I just had a thought running in my head I want to run by you guys. What I'm hearing and really condensing into these challenges is we need consistency, right? We need maybe some creativity, a change in how we've done things, and we need some continuity with in the sense of collaboration. I'm not really trying to alliterate. I'm just saying in my head, there's a difference between a referral and collaboration, right? To me, collaboration, at least the way I'm defining it in my head, requires kind of a connectedness, a presence with each other. And so, the churches themselves, as Bishop was saying, and as the judge was talking about, they have consistency in these neighborhoods, right? They have the credibility because of that consistency in what they're doing. How do we, when we're pointing out, okay, here's a part of the system that's broken. How do we wrap around this collaborative approach, like be able to, in a healthy way, go either we need to fix this or there needs to be a change in direction around that? I mean, obviously, it's when we do kind of these searches that we do, you put all these resources into play for a short period of time. It gets people involved. And you'll see in the process, there's gaps in the system. There's frustrations that happen. In us seeing these frustrations from our different perspectives, from the courts, from education, from not-for-profit, from the church area, what are some creative ways you've seen, Bishop, let's start with you, I guess, that the church is the centerpiece in these neighborhoods? What have been some creative ways you've seen law enforcement, child and family services, different organizations working together in real time to start to change a culture as part of that neighborhood?
Well, I am excited to say that we do several things, but one of the things that we did was Shop with a Cop, where the caseworkers with Child Protective Services gave us the name of Kinship Families, and that didn't receive any dollars from child welfare. They were just placed with grandma and or whoever, and then the church donated $100 per kid to go to Walmart and shop for Christmas with a police officer. Well, the struggle in the Black community with law enforcement and community trust, we wanted to make sure that the youth that were in foster care and those parents and the community had a chance to do a bridge relationship type thing. And so we, as the bridge maker, then help provide that opportunity. Well, what happened was we served over 600 children in that capacity this past Christmas, to where officers in 5 different areas went and shopped with kids in foster care, with the church being involved. And so that built trust between the community, those pastors that was a part, the law enforcement that was part, and Child Protective Services. What we're doing now, we're forming what we're calling CABs, CCAB, Community Clergy Advisory Boards, in communities made up of Child Protective Services, made up of CASA, made up of law enforcement, made up of pastors. And we're saying, how can we do this together? We're doing a giant Easter egg hunt coming up here in a few weeks with foster youth. And then inside the plastic Easter egg is not only candy, but is also $25 that's on a gift card that they can go to Walmart, whatever, and donated by the churches, and the churches are part of it. So the creativity is unlimited when you can sit and join together. So what are the points of engagement that we can do to build trust? There has to be relational engagement in order for trust to be established.
I appreciate that so much. I'll offer a couple things. I think it takes courage to have courageous conversations about our outcomes are telling us that we're not getting something right. Right? And there's a lot of hardworking people that care deeply about kids and families, and we're all doing the work, but we oftentimes keep replicating cycles and somehow thinking it's just going to get naturally better. And we know that it takes a lot of different, so what the bishop was just saying is that it takes creativity. One of the tactical things that I think could be really helpful is different organizations are recruiting foster parents. That means different organizations are in competition to recruit foster parents. And when we do that, we don't get the best of all of us. So if we all want to recruit foster parents and have a high standard of quality, but foster parents should have options to select what kind of organization they want to foster with and in partnership with. And different organizations offer a bunch of different things. St. Jude's Ranch for Children offers something different. But community recruitment of foster homes as opposed to siloed recruitment causes barriers and delays and the sort of unintended consequence of sort of competition. And so there are jurisdictions across the country that do foster parent recruitment differently. And so I think that's just one important thing for us to look at is how we get people engaged in becoming foster parents, how we support them in this, because it's a tough job to be part of a foster parent, and how do we create quality standards, but also work a little bit smarter than not working so hard of like everybody recruiting independently of each other. So that's a sort of practical thing that I think would be really, really important to talk about. So thank you.
No,
I just want
that's
to
all.
add that, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Dylan. Go ahead.
I just wanted to add that knowing the resources is something that's real important, especially when it comes to the school district, because it's the 5th largest school district in the nation, right? So it's enormous. And to do something like the April celebration of child abuse and awareness, you have to have a lot of people on board. You have to have administrators, you have to have the superintendent, you have to have people that are working together. And I know that we're all so busy, but the children matter. And we have, I started to cry when she showed that, when Dr. Bella showed that video. The children matter. And if we don't take time away from our busy jobs or, our mindset on one thing, we're not going to reach the kids. So we need to know where the resources are. We need to know that we have to work as a team and collaborate together, no matter what position you're in, because you're going to find foster kids. In any industry, you're going to find human trafficking kids that are being human trafficked all over. So we have to work together. We have to come together and just keep the conversation open.
I could add just one thing. I think as the bishop hit on that, years ago, I went out speaking to all our clergy in North Las Vegas and to try to educate and awareness, but we never kind of pulled everything together. It was more like just talk about the system, and I got to talk from the podium, and I really enjoyed speaking on that. I think I should have became a pastor. I just really love the excitement. We talk about recruiting foster homes in the community, but we didn't do the job, which I think the bishop hit on. Our system, we got 3,000 kids in the system, 300 and something caseworkers, right, in Child Protective Services, and everything standardized, rules of procedure and all that, the big system. We need to localize. Just as Chaplain Frank said with the school district, it's too big. So when we got geographic areas, north, south, east, west, and central, why not with those, when they get a case in that, reach out to that local church in that area where the abuse or neglect or wherever the concern is on that, in that area. We never develop the resources. We give them and say, here, you go for substance abuse counseling over here, and you're in North Las Vegas, you go to Henderson. No, what we need to do is communicate with the church and say, let's get those resources, as the bishop says. In the department, we get grants for services. So here's what we do. You need to put those services through the church, not go to an agency for housing referrals. Put that through the church with those resources. Let the church be visitation centers. Let the church be family resource centers where they can come and be the hub of that. But you got to give them the resources. That means we got to have the services through that church there, not in another, not in another city. And that's what we need to do. I think we need to localize it to really get it. I think the church is a great area on that. And we do it globally, but we don't go right down the local. I think you need to localize it and really build those relationships. I think Bishop hit it right on. Relational, engagement. That's what it's all about with the fans, but also with the providers and the service things. And we just don't do a good job. We're too big. We need to localize it and get those resources to those communities so that they can gain the trust and deliver it in their neighborhoods, not somewhere else.
So, Judge, let me ask you this question then. I 100% agree with what you just said. And in listening to the bishop, obviously he's in Texas, he's navigated a different set in general, of hoops, regulations, process to pull off what he's doing. Here in Southern Nevada, where a majority of our panelists are, what is blocking beyond, let's say we have a growing will among our faith community. I know there's a number of churches throughout the valley that have started a push toward foster care, different things like that. And obviously, I think there's a whole lot of pieces that you just perfectly hit on there, right? How do we bring the resources, into proximity with each other to provide, you don't want to hop on a bus to hit 13 different things. How do we bring that all into one spot to provide it? And I think that would include, that relational piece obviously includes trust building with the social workers, with the people who are overseeing those cases as part of that relational piece. What in Southern Nevada is keeping that from happening? And if I could jump over to the bishop right after that, What are those maybe overlapping areas that you managed, and how did you do your workarounds to be able to provide more of this stuff? Let me put an addendum on that before you answer too. I know in Southern Nevada, we have some very strong community-oriented policing pieces now to our city that didn't exist really a decade ago. And they've been very friendly and utilized across the board with our faith community. So I know there's motion that direction, but not specifically that I've seen in the area of foster care. So what are those limitations that you're seeing?
I think what happens, we have Mari Pilati, who's one of our assistant director for the Department of Family Services, working close with the faith-based, but we never delivered services. We talked about that, we educated, but we never made that connection saying, okay, what's the issue we have in the community? It's homelessness. Well, how are we going to do that? Not refer them to the housing agency, right? How do we do it right in that community? So I think we haven't had a good job. We got good communication and reach out, but we never made that connection of putting the right people. I think what happens, we get too high level. We get the top dogs talking at the top, and it sounds great, but we don't get that action piece. How does that translate down to action? How do you translate that to get those services, through the church on that? How do we set up substance abuse counseling through the church at a facility through the church on that, where we can have providers go in the church or near the church on that to do those services in that? How do you compensate the churches? When we try to do visitation centers, there's a cost to that. How can we help out our churches on that financially and get those resources with our family? And we never able to make the connection. We did a nice job talking, and it was great talking around that the Baptist church would be, talking from the pulpit about trying to get foster care and stuff, but we never made that connection. How do you really put the words in action? And I think the issue, it gets at the top dogs. We talk about it, but never filtrates down to an action plan. How do you actually get those services delivered? You give grants to service providers that will go in that community on there, right? We would provide services for them. We would get them a grant on and provide those services. So there's a financial interest to them being in to expand in their services within those communities on that. So you got to make it for all the providers to get their buy-in, but it takes putting those resources, and we have a lot of resources. And now with the Family First Preventive Services Act, they want to put the preventive services for some use of mental health with the funding. Now can we parlay that into really getting more localized on that? And I think that's an issue with funding. It's a major issue. But if we do Family First, which we're waiting for our statewide plan to be approved, it has not been approved yet for the funding, but I think we do that. Now's the time to rethink how can we make that connection. And I'm not going to talk to the bishop. I owe him breakfast and lunch today, but when he comes to Vegas, I want to talk to him how you actually got it, from the talk to the action stage, because that's where we haven't got there yet, and make those relationships.
Well, I like to say, and Judge, you and I not only need to do breakfast, but we need to do a kind of a traveling tour, around. So we, you are spot on, Judge. The only way you're going to empower the community is bring financial resources and then skill sets into the community, into the church. The folks in the community will come to a trusted location with trusted people that they know, and they'll do that. And that breaks down all kinds of barriers. So what we did when we began to do it, we formed a clergy panel. We went to the state, and in Texas they have faith-based staff that works with faith-based, and we said that we wanted to go and meet with a judge. One judge in particular is Judge Sakai in San Antonio, head of drug court, and Judge Sakai invited us to come in and to be a part of his drug court and be a part of some of the meetings and training and classes to be held in local churches. There weren't any dollar resources there to support that. What we did on our side, we provided through fundraising. We provided a meal when we had when it was going at its best. We provided a meal for those families when they came in. They had a meal. We had a volunteers that made it friendly, and they had the classes and had the things that they would do. But the spinoff behind that is this. An example is one particular father became very, very familiar and a friend with one of the volunteer men that was there. And when that father came off of drugs and began to do the things that could get his kids back, and when they had the graduating class and they got their kids back, that father stood up and said, because of this relationship is the reason why I'm off drugs, I'm not doing alcohol, and why my kids are coming home. So when you have those types of empowerment and systems in the community, then the community begins to see not only what could be done in intervention for the kids to come home, but they can see and understand prevention. Same thing can happen with sex trafficking. Same thing can happen with the aging population. Same thing can happen in any of those areas when you do that. So, Judge, keep waving that flag, and I'm gonna catch a plane to come get that breakfast, and we're gonna do this tour together.
And I think a tour is a good idea if we're going to hit north, south, east, west, and central in this city in particular. Hey, we're going to have to start winding this up. So I'm going to ask a couple questions directed to individual people. And I think we've gotten some great, this is part one. We're going to come back in June and keep addressing these issues. And I would like to point out the Mayor's Faith Initiative, 10 years old. And we have kind of started coming out of COVID to get the whole band back together. Each of those areas that I was telling you, the Mayor's Faith Initiative works in, addictions, mental health, stronger families, all those areas, homelessness. We're getting ready to relaunch and get the larger community back involved again, because we really are committed, and the city is committed to faith in action. That's why I think this is important, and why this last piece is important. I know there's a lot of people in our churches here going, how can we get our church involved? How can we be involved? I think we've got good info there, but that's going to continue to build, and we're going to do our best among the Mayor's Faith Initiative to be a funnel, for people to get involved at the areas that are effective. Now, I just referred to COVID, so I want to throw this question out to you, Christina. You guys are specialized. You see the most difficult areas of trauma. You guys are working at a very high level there. Coming out of COVID, and I'm sure many of us could answer this at different levels. Where have you seen these struggles with addiction, with depression, with mental health? Has that increased among those you're serving? And secondly, just give us a brief synopsis, because I think, a lot of what we've been talking about, part of the struggle in this area is trauma really does affect how people function, their behavior, how they see the world, right? And so we have a lot of good-natured people who really want to be useful, but just give us a little tidbit on, how people can educate themselves more on that trauma side so they can be useful, not at a professional level like you are necessarily, unless they get involved, but in the lay terms. How does knowledge about trauma help you be more effective in these fields?
Wow, Mike, thank you for 4 really tough questions.
And I want you to do it in 1 minute.
Just real quick, yeah.
Yeah.
Being trauma sensitive and trauma informed is critical. People can utilize, of course, the incredible resources of the internet. I saw a couple notes about TBRI, which is Trust-Based Relationship Intervention, which is an incredible evidence-based program. We at St. Jude's have been going through TBRI. Relationships are such an incredible, important part of the healing process. So that's what I'll say about trauma. About COVID, I actually want to say this. This is going to sound a bit disruptive. Our kids and families have been living within the epidemic of child abuse and neglect and domestic violence and crisis. So COVID impacted them, yes. but it impacted the rest of us a whole lot more and actually kind of leveled the playing field. So the trauma that many of us that had the privilege of being able to go to the grocery store and couldn't, that's been people's reality outside of COVID as the pandemic, right, as the reason. But young people and children and families that have been living within the epidemic of poverty and violence looked at COVID like, why y'all freaking out? We've been in crisis for years. So kids and young people that experience abuse and neglect have an incredible superpower of being resilient. And when we honor that and be strength-based to say their ability to still get up every day and go to school or go to work is something that each of us had to learn in our really humbling experience of COVID. So I could say a lot more, but I'll stop there. So thank you.
I appreciate that. And I'm assuming that you and your people there are available to educate our community, our churches on trauma-informed interaction, relational interaction, right?
Yes, we're happy to help in any way possible. My
Awesome.
contact info will be available. Call us. You can volunteer, help, become a foster parent. We'll just walk you through anything. We always want to be of service. So thank you.
Awesome. So if we didn't get to your questions, I apologize. You can come back in June. We'll have another chance. We're going to keep going down this road. We do not see this as a one-off. In fact, we're hoping kind of this type of forum drives us to work together to problem solve, right? Not just in our own boardrooms at our churches and places alone, but together within the community, so that relational piece is connected, that we're working with each other within, you know, wherever we are. You could be anywhere in the country right now, but I think just trying to find a program that you guys can do in your church or other areas misses the larger cultural issue. As we collaborate together, we can address those cultural things in a much stronger and unified way. So I'm going to encourage you, if you're here and you're part of the faith community here in Southern Nevada, we already have your email. We're going to send you out ways you can get connected as we really start to engage collaboratively in these issues again, beyond education, with the Mayor's Faith Initiative. Chaplain Barry is always saying, hey, if you want to get involved, I want worker bees, not wannabes, you know, which is really just his way to say we need to put faith in action, right? We have some of the best people who've dealt with some of the most broken systems that are that learned how to engage those systems because they were active within those systems, and finding ways within their own culture, whether it's the church or the courts, you know, or not-for-profits, to go, how can we not only be very effective and not miss people who are right in front of us, those we're dealing with every day, but how do we fish upstream in the preventative way too, right? We all can't do everything, but as we collaborate, we can really get there. I was given a book a little while ago by a friend of mine who's a historian. It's called How to Prevent the Traffic in Girls, right? You might have pulled that out on the last one of these I did too. The publication date for this was 1899. And they were already having symposiums on the growing problem of trafficking here in the United States. And every chapter actually came out of a symposium just like this. You know, Bishop would have a chapter, the judge would have a chapter, and it was focusing on these broken problems in our society and how important it is to get upstream from that, as well as minister to the need right in front of us. And you have an opportunity to do that through your own businesses, your own faith community. But I would make the pitch that as we come together across this city and start to put into play what we learned today, and be good listeners, not, you know, problem solving. It means we got to be listening so we know what the real problem is, just not our perceived part of that problem, but the whole bigger picture. And I can't thank all of you enough for educating us today. And we'll have their resources, and this will be up in its entirety later. But Chaplain Barry, who kicked us off for this event, he's going to end this with some closing comments. Thank you guys for allowing me to throw questions your way, and for all your knowledge that you shared with us.
Thanks, Mike. Appreciate it. Our goal today was to raise awareness about the needs of our children and families in the child welfare system, especially as it relates to human trafficking. Thanks to our speakers and panel members, we've accomplished that by providing you with 3 important perspectives or lenses. Judge Sullivan equipped us with a judicial lens governing children and families in the child welfare systems, from the overview of child welfare and foster care Bill of Rights, Family First Prevention Services Act. Bishop Blake equipped us with a lens on how a church can respond to the needs of our children and families, from prevention to preservation to intervention and aftercare. Christina provided us with a provider's perspective for hope and healing for our most vulnerable children, especially those who are involved in both child welfare and juvenile justice systems. The questions raised during our Q&A demonstrated an interest by the participants in protecting our children. But in order to be successful, we need more knowledge. These presentations set the foundation for part 2 of our summit, where you'll hear from the Child Welfare Department, Clark County Department of Public Services, about what we can do to combat the challenges inherent in our system, our community, and our most valuable children and families they serve. DPS will discuss what they are doing to serve our sexually exploited children and those at risk for sexual exploitation, especially as it relates to the laws that are currently in place. They will also discuss what is being done to partner with community on prevention, preservation, and intervention and aftercare. There'll be a deeper dive into the welfare and its retention and human trafficking. As a testament to this, I will close with a very important tidbit of information that I just received from DPS, as a matter of fact. Beginning in 2023, all reports of youth being sexually exploited or at risk for sexual exploitation will be received by the child welfare agencies in Nevada. This is in part to further support decriminalization of victims of sexual exploitation of our youth, and to create a new service array for servicing this population. Now more than ever, child welfare will need to partner with our community to support this population. Finally, you will hear their call for action to the community about how we can partner with various agencies and groups for the sake of our children and families, so that we can together become a stronger community and keep our children and families healthy. I can't thank everyone enough, our speakers, the Mayor's Faith Initiative, our mayor, the participants, for all that you have done in participating with us. But this is just the beginning, everyone. Our second part of this venture will be in June, and then we're going to go further after that. Our kids are our future. And based upon the number of people that participated and that are still participating, bless you all for taking an interest on saving the lives of our kids. God bless and have a good day.